and you look at Russia and Ukraine, it's a test of wills. Well, the Ukrainians, this is their home. This is their home. This is their freedom, which I talked about earlier. So how strong is their will going to be? It's going to be strong. It's going to be as strong as imaginable. And then on the other side, you have Russia. How much does Putin care about the level of sacrifice that's made? We don't know, but we're starting to see. I would say we kind of know. We're more familiar now that he's not that concerned. So that's what we have. We have a test of wills because each side thought their will was going to be a little bit stronger. And guess how we find out? We find out by fighting, and we find out by killing each other until it's over. So, again, I think that the Ukrainians their will is absolute, but they also lack the numbers. And unfortunately, they're in a war of attrition. Because when you ask me what I think of it or what I think would be the outcome, I was, in the beginning of the war, thinking that Ukraine would fight a guerrilla war, an asymmetric war. And they have entered in more of a conventional war. And this is a conventional war, for the most part, very quickly turns into a war of attrition. And now we have more people than you. We can make our ammunition faster than you. And look, America can keep sending bombs and guns, but at a certain point, somebody's got to wield those bombs and guns. And if it becomes a war of attrition, which it is absolutely morphing into, that outcome is not going to be good for the Ukrainians.
Because they don't have the same number of soldiers.
Don't have the same number of people.
What sucked them into a traditional conflict?
I think it happened because they were able to achieve some what appeared to be and what felt like conventional victories. So I'm sure you saw images of patrols and convoys of Russian vehicles going in and being bombed and it looked as if, oh, this almost looks like conventional warfare. It's these tanks against a smaller number of tanks, but against conventional type forces maneuvering against the Russians, and they were winning, which they did. But when you knock out 20 Russian tanks and you feel like it's a win, and it is a win, until the Russia sends 20 more tanks. Or when you kill 50 Russian soldiers and you lost 5 guys, you think, hey, that's a win. And it is a win. It's a tactical win. But then the Russians send 50 more soldiers, and 50 more soldiers, and 50 more soldiers, and 50 more soldiers. So war should be the absolute last option. And I think it got moved up in the list of options, unfortunately.
Yeah, it does not feel globally like people are waiting until the last second for war right about now. I would have said 10 years ago, probably, that maybe we really are at the end of history. That's certainly how it felt. Didn't feel like there was going to be any of these sort of conquering nation vibes anymore. And obviously that tweet would have aged very poorly had I sent it. So the question becomes, how do we get them to pull back? So again, you talk about detachment. So they're trying a strategy, probably not going to work. If you went in to advise them, I assume it would go something like, guys, play this one out. Doesn't end well. You're not going to be able to match them troop for troop. So I get it. A lot of reputations on the line that this is the right play, but we just have to look at the data and say this isn't going to work. Then what? Go back to guerrilla warfare? Would that be their only shot?
Guerrilla warfare. Yep. Guerrilla warfare.
And do you think there's just too much political machinery in the way for that to happen? Or why haven't they figured that out themselves?
I mean, and don't get me wrong, they are doing some guerrilla type warfare, but they also get drawn into oh, this is our city, we're going to hold it.
Is that the problem? Like it's a raccoon trap or a
type of
baboon
thing.
trap?
That type of thing has happened. This is our city, we're going to hold it. We're going to fight for it. It's like, if you fight for it and you kill 1,000 Russians, but you lose 100 Ukrainians, okay, there's going to come 1,000 more Russians. And I'm sure you've seen pictures of the young kids that are now putting their uniforms on in Ukraine, and they're going to go fight. This is what happens. Human capital. And yes, if I was there advising them, I would be telling them to fight a guerrilla war. No, guerrilla war doesn't feel good. If you're a country like Ukraine, these are proud soldiers in a country that has a trained military. It's almost the antithesis of the way they would think to fight and the way they would want to fight. They would want to fight man to man on the battlefield, and guerrilla warfare is not man to man on the battlefield. It's roadside bombs. It's snipers. That's what it is. And if you've been on the receiving end of roadside bombs and snipers, it's horrifying. So, but you'd have to kind of culturally change them to have the attitude that we're going to fight an asymmetric war against a numerically superior enemy, which is what they're facing.
Who's the greatest guerrilla force in history that you've studied?
The greatest guerrilla force in history. There's tons of them. I mean, you already mentioned some of the Native Americans that were out there on the plains. They were outstanding. Obviously, the Viet Cong, they were outstanding.
They carried tanks over a mountain range.
Yep.
That's insane to me.
Yep. And I mean, the history is just filled with. I mean, look at Afghanistan. That wasn't a conventional war. We left.
Russia left.
England left. So
3-0.
Are they good at what they're doing? Yeah, they're good at what they're doing. It also shows you how powerful asymmetric warfare is, because a force that's untrained, that doesn't have the technology, but they have time. I'm sure you heard that about the Afghans. Like, the Afghans were like, oh yeah, you guys have bullets, you guys have bombs, we have time. This is where we live. That's what the Ukrainians have. That's where they live. They have time. And to try and fight the Russians in that way is bad. And then once that happens, what the Russians should do is say, hey, look, we don't want this kind of beef. We don't want it, because you try and occupy a country, which is what Russia would have to do, or occupy those regions. Now you've got occupation forces. Occupation forces get picked off for a year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. And eventually they go, all right, we don't want to do this anymore. That's what America said in Vietnam. That's what America said in Afghanistan. But look, we don't want to do this anymore. So that's the way. And I actually, you asked me how I think this will play out. I think that is how it will play out. It's just going to take a much larger amount of casualties to get there, because I don't think the Ukrainians are going to surrender or anything, but they're going to get to a point where they can no longer attempt to fight face to face against the Russians. So they're going to be forced into a insurgency, and then it'll be a long drawn out process. That was when people had originally asked me about what was going to happen. I said, this is going to be a 15-year war. It's going to be an insurgency by the Ukrainians in the occupied zones of the Russians. And that didn't happen. It didn't happen because it turned into a conventional war. Very much a conventional war. Not a total, but a much more conventional war that is not as advantageous to the Ukrainians.
Do you have a read on Putin? What do you think are his ambitions? There's been much debate about, is he an imperialist who's not going to stop until he's gobbled up all of Ukraine? Is he really just trying to create a border from NATO? Do you have a sense?
I could tell you my sense. I don't know. Wouldn't put much weight on my assessment. So whether it's worth even chiming in on, I don't know. I mean, the West definitely pushed Putin and cornered him, and Putin is the type of guy that you can't corner. You need to give him a way out. You need to give him a way to save face, and I don't think we did a good job of doing that. He's a proud guy, and when you corner someone that's proud, this is why people are worried about him using nuclear weapons, because they know that much about him. He's a proud guy. He's proud of his country. And you corner a guy like that, you don't give him a way out. They do dumb things. Ego, right?
Yes, indeed. All right, I have to ask because I actually want to know. You get elected president, and Putin's like, all right, I'm going to beat this guy in jiu-jitsu, and then we can call the whole thing off. Mm-hmm. Can you take him?
Yeah. Yeah, he's a judo practitioner, and so he's going to be very good, skilled on the feet, and he's going to have judo also has excellent groundwork as well. But how old is Putin right now?
I think he's 70 or pushing 70.
Yeah, he's going to have real problems with me if that's what it's going to come down to. But I think, yeah, I would take Putin.
Now, somebody I asked for fans of yours for things they wanted to ask that nobody's ever asked, and one of them was, how hard do you choke? So since we're talking about tapping Putin, how hard do you choke?
I mean, till people tap. Yeah. I mean, it's not that big of a deal. It's weird, for you, like choking is a big deal, but for people that do jiu-jitsu, it's like, how hard do you shake someone's hand? It's like, right. That's just the way things go, and that's life, and you get choked, and Putin's an old guy, and if a 70-year-old guy had to fight me, it would be a bummer, Like if I had to fight a 27-year-old jiu-jitsu champion, it'd be a problem for me.
Right.
And I actually do that pretty regularly, and it's usually a problem. So,
all right. So there are two major conflicts in the world right now. What's your take on what's going on with Israel, Palestine? Is that going to play out tactically as they just keep bombing from the air? Have they already started backing off from that? I think I heard they had. Are the tunnels going to be the problem? Like, how does this one play out?
The way it's going to play out, I think that Israel is very determined to completely eradicate Hamas.
Do you think they have a metric by which they judge that? Like, they obviously don't have a roll call of who everybody is, and you go find them, and when the checklist is done, you're done. Or do they?
I bet they have pretty good intel. I mean, once you start having intel sources inside of a country, like, you can know a lot about what's going on, and I bet you they have a pretty good roster. Whether they have a roster that's down to a man, I don't know, but they know. And I think they've determined that they need to eradicate Hamas, and I think they're going to eradicate Hamas. And it certainly does not appear through their current actions that they're going to relent at all until they've gotten Hamas eradicated.
Do you think the international pressure for them to dramatically drop the body count will force them to go tunnel by tunnel, house by house, or do you think they're just going to be like, fuck it, like, we're just going to keep bombing?
The bomb, once you bomb, you still have to go in. So they're going to have to go in one way or the other. And so I think they're going to make the judgment on that question not based on international pressure. I think they're going to make that judgment based on when they are tactically ready. They feel like they've gotten to a point where they can go in and do the street-to-street, house-to-house tunnel clearance. Then they'll do it. But I think the international pressure came so quickly that it didn't mount. The international pressure didn't mount. It pegged, it redlined, and it's just staying there. And I think Israel's sort of saying, okay, well, that's the international pressure. It's redlining, but we're going to keep doing what we're doing until we get this threat completely eliminated.
Do you have fears of that escalating?
It's going to cause years and years of strategic problems for Israel, because they're going to have to, people are going to seek revenge on them for the next 100 years. So do I think it's going to be an issue? Yep. Might it be some short-term thinking for them? Yep. Is that the mode that they're in right now after they have their, people massacred. Yep.
How close have you looked at that situation in terms of the historical context?
Decently.
Is this intractable on anything remotely approaching a realistic timeline? Like, sure, maybe over 1,000 years it unwinds, but is this something that can unwind in the next 2 generations?
No.
There's 0 options.
0 options.
What is the sticking point?
Lack of forgiveness and egos. So if you and I have a problem and whatever happened in the past, we can't forgive each other, we will not have resolution. And there's been atrocities on both sides, and there's enough people on each side that will not forgive, that the people that will not forgive and will not move forward will continually drag the rest of those both sides down.
Will they drag them down, or will they suck them in?
Suck them in, drag them down, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, well, it's interesting to me. There's a very big chasm between those 2 ideas. So idea number 1 is that hatred is so powerful, and I can rally you around your hatred and the misery, the squalor that you live in, and I can pull that front and center, and I can say, they've done this to you. And not only as an act of divine justice must you strike them down, but it's the only way forward for us to finally have what God wants us to have. We have to do this. That's sucking them in. Sucking them down would be, hey, please stop. Don't strike them again. For the love of God, like, let us just live our lives. And then they go strike anyway, and then you get bombs. And so I am not close enough to that problem to understand, like, whether the populace is like, no, we elected them. This is who we want to lead us, and they're right, and this is just, and this what's happening to us now is merely more proof of the injustice of these people that have held us down for so long. I don't know if that's how they read it, or if it really is like, oh my God, like, if we could just get leadership in here that wasn't constantly provoking them, we could finally achieve balance of some kind.
The answer is yes. Both those things are occurring. And there's both people that are wishing that there's people in both Israel and in Gaza that are wishing that the damn governments would stop and we could just, like, carry on with our normal lives and shake hands. There's people in both those elements. I mean, you see protesters in Israel. You don't see them so much in Gaza right now. But there was, like, I saw images and videos of people in Gaza lashing out at Hamas, especially when it comes time for aid to get delivered. So there's people on both sides that would just as soon, hey, we've had enough of this, let's shake hands and let's carry on. And there's also people that are completely, so what was that? Well, that was sucked in, or is that sucked down? Okay, that's sucked down. And there's also people that are sucked in on both sides,
right,
that are like, nope, the only way, this is what they did. The Israelis right now, October 7th, and whatever other, the countless other atrocities, and then the Palestinians and their land and their atrocities, and you take both those things, and they're not going to stop. They're not going to forgive. They're not going to forget, and they're going to fight.
All right, let's say that you were living in a portion of America that became qualitatively like Palestine is right now. That feels like warlord territory for me, which you have somewhat jokingly said, if things ever got bad enough, I would just become a benevolent warlord. I would take over. And you, at one point you said something like, I wouldn't say that I was stoked if we were at end of days, but I'm ready for it. What would you actually do? Like, so you may not know this about my background, but I actually came up as a writer, film guy. I've written screenplays, comic books, all kinds of stuff. And I love the quote about a science fiction author that your job is not to forecast the automobile, it's to forecast the traffic jam. So you're trying to figure out, like, okay, what I know about humans, how is this going to play out? So I get I'm asking you to imagine a fictional scenario, but in said fictional scenario, knowing what you know about you and other people and what it would be like, because I'm going to assume you'd be trying to lead people to something better and more hopeful, and but that you actually have the ability to be violent, to be dangerous, to back down the dogs at the door. So what would that really look like?
If there was some sort of an apocalyptic event that took place,
where legitimately, I mean, I'm trying not to say what would, if you were in Palestine, what would you do? But like if you were in a situation just like that, where you've got bad warlords and they are holding the population hostage to some extent, it's rubbled the fuck out, man. I mean, this place is just, you're literally getting MREs dropped from the sky. And that is the only way that you guys are subsisting. You just watched however many years of billions of dollars of aid pour in, and it all went to military tunnels and stuff like that. It did not go to projects that make the people's lives better. Knowing that the core thing that you build up from is freedom, ready, go. Do you start like being that charismatic leader that organizes people, or do you find the person that's going to be the mouthpiece? I would say you've got so much credibility, I'd expect it to be
so
you.
I hate to drill down like this, but are you talking about a hypothetical situation where there's a apocalyptic event and now there's mayhem going on? Or are you talking about if I was a Palestinian right now in Palestine, or sorry, in Gaza, what would I do? Those are like very different questions.
Then we'll start with, you're in Gaza right now, but you are Palestinian, so that you're one of the people. What would you do?
Well, the other assessment or the other assumption that we have to make is that I'm Palestinian, I'm in Gaza, but I have an open mind, right? So my mind is free to assess what's happening. So yeah, if I was there right now, what I would do is I would start looking around going, okay, the situation that we're in is absolutely horrific and we cannot continue down this road. What is happening? All right. Do the Palestinian people around me, my friends, my family, what's happening with them right now? What do we need to do so that we can secure and stabilize our lives and our like small area, our building, our city block, whatever the case may be? I'm going to get that thing stable and secure. And one of the ways that I'm going to be able to do that is my family, my friends, my close friends, we're going to start to secure my area. And then guess what? I'm going to go across the block to the next people over and say, hey, what's going on with you guys? Where are you at? How many people you got? How many able humans do you have here? Because we got to make some things happen. Number one, we got to figure out a way to get the food that's getting dropped onto the beach. I want to help us get that done, and I want to do it in a way that we can help as many people as we can. Right now, we got injuries happening because people are fighting each other for that stuff. So let's get some control over that. So that's what I would do. I would start very small with my family and my immediate friends and getting some kind of control over a small area. Once I have control over that small area, now I'm going to start expanding that. And what we're going to be looking to do is we're going to be looking to stabilize things as opposed to destabilize things. And so what do I have to do? That means the Hamas guys that are down the street will be like, hey, you guys are getting bombed. You're not going to get us bombed. So you don't come over here. If you come over here, we're going to have a problem. And I'm going to go to the border and talk to the Israelis and say, hey, you guys are bombing us? Don't bomb here. This is going to be a problem if you bomb here. So don't. Here's where we're at. So I would start to try and communicate, and I would start to try and build relationships with these two opposing elements so that I could best support the people that I'm trying to now take care of.
Man, I love that. This is the beginning of something very interesting. So I don't know how far we'll be able to take the hypothetical, but at each of the things you're describing, I'm able to track how you view the world in a really interesting way. So your first, safety, right? So Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we're going to just make sure everybody's sheltered, they've got food, they've got water. Then we're going to try to stabilize access to the resources that we're going to need. Then we're building alliances, whether it's with the person next door or whether it's with the the other military. And in fact, as you were going to first Hamas and then the Israeli military, I could feel you reaching out to who are the bodies that matter? Like what swings the needle here? Let me identify those things, go out and do it. It's what's so interesting about that analysis is that is exactly what you do in business, except nobody's shooting at you. But in terms of like, okay, where are we at now? We need to stabilize. We need to gain access to in business capital. I need the resources. I need to know what my run rate is. How long can I either lose money or how much profit am I making to be able to scale and grow? Keeping an open mind, getting ego out of the way, knowing who to talk to. But also there's a little bit of threat in the shit that you say, which I just come back to is I think a big part of the reason that you're an archetype for people and that they keep wanting you to run for president because they hunger for that archetype. They hunger for a strong man with the tactical and strategic ability to do that, who has a set of morals, which I think is so important, which I think you've called principles. That's kneeling before something, which you didn't specifically say in this, but it feels like you're kneeling before the family, the people on your team. I'm here to serve you. I'm going to make sure you guys are okay. I have to imagine that would be a lot of the rhetoric as your coalition building. Like, look, treat us well. Don't do anything fucking stupid. We've got your back. You're going to be well taken care of. How am I doing so far?
Yeah, trying to get people to think more strategic about what's happening. And hey, this is where we are right now. We can lash out over here or lash out over there, but where does that get us in the long run? Where does that get us strategically? And if it's not going to help us strategically, then we shouldn't be doing it. So that ties into what I would be saying to my people.
What would you do? Because here's the thing I think in reality you would run into. You have an implicit goal in that, which is I want everyone here to thrive. That's my goal. And so that's what I'm working towards. You're going to run up against people who their goal is to punish the enemy. What would you do when they understand your goal, they just don't buy into it? They have a totally different goal. How would you handle that?
Yeah. What's your long-term strategic goal look like? Because you're saying you want to hurt the enemy. What does that do? Where does that get us? Because we can go hurt the enemy tonight. And hey, we can go hurt the enemy on October 7th, right? That's exactly what they did. They hurt Israel badly. Where's it gotten them? So that's where it's getting people to think strategic instead of think tactically, and getting people to think with logic instead of think with their ego and their emotions, which is not easy. And you can't just say don't get emotional. You can't pull emotion and ego completely out of the calculus of your decision making, but you have to weight them a lot less. Because I've got people, same thing with the Israelis. The Israelis can't be like, hey, they attacked us, but we can't get emotional. We need to have a measured response. Like, no, it's like you have to put that emotion into the calculus. My wife and daughter and son were just murdered, and we need to do something about it now. Like, okay, we gotta take this. It's real. The emotion is real. So you got to put that in the calculus. At the same time, you also can't let emotions be the heaviest weight in your decision-making process. You can't let your country's ego be the biggest weight in your decision-making process. Does it have to have weight in there? Yeah. But it can't be the biggest weight that's now driving you to do things that don't make sense in a long-term strategic way.
Yeah, that's why, to me, this all comes down to goals. Because if your goal is simply to hurt and kill as many people as you can on your enemy's side, and that death for you is perfectly acceptable, there is no problem with that. In fact, it is simply the gateway to eternal paradise. That's where it gets tricky, and probably part of why this is so difficult to unwind, because in the emotion of they must be hurt, justice must be served, divine justice, and if I die in the service of that justice, that's fine. You now have a loop because you don't have a way to back them out of that by saying, well, I have a better goal for you, right? Look at your son, your daughter. Because my initial reaction, and I still believe the following statement is true, but it's probably incomplete and probably a little naive. But when I think about whatever the solution is going to be, the solution is going to involve Palestinians believing that their kids have a bright future. And the second they don't believe they have a bright future, all hope is lost. Now, them believing that their children have a bright future, now that comes down to definition of bright future. And if bright future is being a martyr, that becomes more problematic. So anyway, I fully acknowledge that I'm thinking through this. I'm so early in my thought process. I do not have enough of the information, but I do think it's valuable for people to leave breadcrumbs about how they think through a problem. So yeah. Very, very interesting. All right. I want to go back to something that you said a minute ago. You were saying I would go over and ask, how many able-bodied people do you have? You didn't say men, and I'm assuming you didn't say men for a reason. What are your thoughts about female leadership in battle?
Well, in a situation like that where we've got a limited number of people and I can take females and put them on sniper rifles and put them into positions where they can utilize their skill sets that they have, that's, of course, when you have an existential threat, you're gonna need everybody. So, I mean, that's one of the reasons the Israeli military does have prominent female members. I mean, everyone serves, male and female.
And leadership specifically, do you see any difference in ability at just a general level?
Well, yes, all leaders have various levels of ability.
But that's what I mean, like on averages. So average male, average female, certainly there's strength discrepancies, but are there leadership propensities that differ?
You know, I work with all kinds of male and female leaders, and the good male leaders and the good female leaders all have the same fundamental characteristics and they follow the same principles, and all the bad leaders that are male and female all have the same terrible idiosyncrasies and egos and emotional issues. And so it's more based on the individual human being than it is based on whether they're male or female.
Do you find that guys have a problem following a female superior?
I'm sure some guys have a problem following a female superior, and I can also tell you factually that there are many, many guys that have a problem following male superiors. So if you're a guy with a big ego, you don't like listening to anybody, and you'll find whatever thing it is about them. Oh, freaking Tom is not, he hasn't been to college, or Tom, he hasn't done this job before, or Tom, he doesn't even know what it's like to whatever. I can find plenty of reasons that I shouldn't have to listen to you. And if I can make it because you have brown hair or whatever, or make it because you're a female, it's all just ego talking. And you're going to find that person that doesn't want to be led by a female is going to have whatever kind of beef with whatever kind of person is in that situation.
If would you have a problem following a female leader?
No.
Yeah.
No. I mean, I've got, three of the bigger companies that I have, Jocko Fuel, which is a supplement company, our COO is a female. Echelon Front, which is a leadership consulting company, our COO is a female. So, and then Origin USA, which is a clothing manufacturing company, our COO is a female. So,
in fairness, though, you're the CEO of all those companies. So while
for now,
you clearly have high-level leadership that are women, if you, and let's put it on the battlefield, if you had a high-performing, very competent female leader, platoon leader?
Sure.
Would you have any problem falling in line and following her the way that you would follow any male leader of similar competence?
So hold on a second. You're asking me right now if there was a highly competent leader that I had to work for, would I have any problem with it?
Yes, if it was female.
Like, this is no factor. It's no factor.
Yeah, I agree violently. I don't understand why anybody looks at anything other than competence. So if a woman, anything can lead me to where I'm trying to get to, that is all I care about. I find it very weird that people don't use as their North Star utility, efficacy. Yeah. Like, is this going to work or not?
I mean, the discrepancy that you already mentioned, which is the discrepancy in combat, is the physical component. That's the discrepancy in in a combat situation is, generally speaking, females are smaller and weaker. And so in combat, that, depending on your job, that can be a significant issue. And sometimes your job isn't what you expect your job to be, because sometimes your job is picking up your friend that weighs 200 pounds and then another 70 pounds with gear on, and that's a problem. So for when you're talking about specifically in combat, there's a physical discrepancy that causes women to very seldomly have the physical capability to be in combat units. That's why they're not a ton of them in combat units. I mean, there's been some females have gone through Ranger School. So I think there's been, so obviously there's females that have gone through Airborne School, but there's an infantry Marine right now, female, I believe, but I'm not 100% sure. Yeah. But that doesn't boil down to their cognitive capacity or anything like that, or their leadership capability. It just boils down to their biological structure.
Yeah, I mean, I partly asked just so that people can hear you, somebody obviously that they will really respect at this level, say the North Star's competence.
Yeah.
I think is very, very wise. As we move forward as a country, there is a very big potential that we could face China as either Cold War or flirting with a hot war if something kicks off in Taiwan. Is that something that you think about? Is it something that you think is plausible? Would you ever want to see American boots on the ground in Taiwan?
Definitely not. I definitely wouldn't want to see that. But I think the Chinese will wait. I think the Chinese will wait and let us go to war with ourselves first. And when we're going to war with ourselves, even not even a hot war in America, but just a cold war in America, a cold civil war, which is like sort of what we're in the beginning of right now. And, it's funny now that I think about it, I mentioned that, hey, these people aren't willing to sacrifice in a hot war, but we could definitely get into a cold civil war here where we can't progress, we can't make decisions. And if China can wait until we're at kind of the height of a cold civil war, they could probably get away with anything. And they know that.
Yeah, China is patient. That is for sure. They think in much longer time cycles than we do. It will be very interesting given how much technology comes out of Taiwan. It's so critical. It really will become a question, I think, of if Xi ever feels like he's got time pressure on him and he needs to make a move. I'm not close enough to that whole thing and how Xi thinks, but certainly talking to enough high-level people that there's some concern, even if it's not necessarily foot on the gas. My hope is that the Chinese economy has taken a big enough hit right now that they're just not going to be in a position where now would be the time. Mm-hmm. We'll see. I don't like kicking the can down the road for somebody else just to have to deal with it. I'd rather figure out a way around the problem. Certainly felt a lot better when we were a far more global society, but the unwinding of that is very interesting. Speaking of that, in fact, you manufacture in the U.S. So this is that in some ways a reaction to the gutting of American manufacturing as we globalized, or what?
It's 100%. It's 100% a reaction to that. We took our manufacturing and we sent it overseas, and we are bringing it back to America. So it's 100% a reaction to that.
And is that for we need a thriving middle class? What's the on the ground result you want to achieve?
Bring manufacturing back to America, because that means you have a thriving middle class. It means you have the ability to manufacture. It means you don't have to rely on people overseas to make things for you, which is almost where we were at. So there's a whole plethora of reasons. I mean, I grew up in New England. In New England, all the manufacturing jobs were sent overseas, especially in the clothing industry. They were sent overseas. And we have literally bought machines from overseas and brought them back to America. So we are 100% bringing it back so that we as a nation can become self-sufficient again. Not to mention, if you care about, look, I mentioned freedom a little bit during this. If you care about freedom at all and you're supporting companies that manufacture in overseas sweatshops where it's basically slave labor, that's a problem. And if you support environmental causes, well, when you manufacture stuff overseas, they don't care about the environment at all. They get done dyeing a pair of blue jeans, and whatever's left over, they dump it in the river, which goes to the ocean. Kills everything. They don't care. When they have to put something in the wash to break down some of the material, there's chemicals in that wash. What do they do with that when it's done? They dump it in the ocean. They don't care. They don't care at all. They don't care about their workers getting injured. They don't care about anything. And so if you care about freedom, if you care about the environment, if you care about the economy, if you care about America being self-sufficient, if you care about those things, your goal would be to one of the primary ways you could do that is to bring manufacturing back to this country. And that's exactly what we're doing.
Okay, so self-reliance is something I'm getting as one of your drivers. I'm imagining you standing before the people that work at your company. I have done this at my own company, so I know what this is like. And one of the things I was trying to do was paint, what does it mean to work at the time Quest, right? What does it mean to work there? What is the part of your identity that I want to breathe life into? What's the galvanizing identity, if you have one, that you try to give your workers? And I imagine that the sort of American spirit is part of that.
Literally everything I just said, and everybody that works for us knows and understands and believes in what we're doing and in what they're doing, because they're what make it possible. You have to have people ready to work, and that's what we have. We have an incredible force of people that have these skills, that are learning these skills, and that are going to take these skills and continue to grow with us. So they all innately understand the importance of this, 100%. That's what we're doing. That's why we're doing it. And that's what we're doing. That's why we're doing it. And those people are the why. The people that work with us, they are the why. We are the why. It's America. They all know that. They all understand that. And it's actually been awesome to see, because now I'm starting to see a lot more other companies are trying to bring manufacturing back. I'm supporting as much as I can, but everybody is starting to look around and say, oh yeah, we need to bring manufacturing back to America. And it's happening. It's absolutely happening. And look, COVID helped out with that as well, right? Because all of a sudden you had the shipping problems, you had the customs problems, all that stuff made people realize how weak our supply chain was. And good companies looked around and said, that's too vulnerable of a position to be in. And it is too vulnerable of a position to be in, not only for a business, not only for an economy, but for a nation. You can't be reliant on other countries, especially adversarial countries, to allow you to buy goods from them. That's insanity. But our corporations in this country, they decided that profit was more important. They decided that if they could make a pair of blue jeans for $2 less and make $2 more and fire a bunch of American workers and shut down our supply chain, they decided it was worth it. And they did it, and then they lied. Because they lied to us and have said we don't have the ability to do that anymore. That's a lie. That's a lie. This is America. This is America. We can make anything. And we will. And we're going to show the world.
That's dope, man. So as somebody who also manufactured here in America at the beginning of Quest, I can't speak to it now because I left, but when I was there, all of it in America, and it was awesome. Now, the crazy thing is, I don't know if this is true for you as well, but we were manufacturing in Compton, City of Industry, like places where people came up hard. And to be able to give people a legitimate business where they had opportunity to grow and to get health insurance and just be a part of something. And especially in the early days when nobody knew who we were. And it was just like, all right, we're here to do something. Like because we as a company had a mission that we were really trying to turn health around. And so my wife and I have said for a long time, it doesn't matter who you are today. It only matters who you want to become and the price you're willing to pay to get there. And so we were talking and I was like, do we really mean that? Or was that just some cool rhetoric? And we were like, no, we really do mean that. And I was like, okay, then if we mean that, we should be willing to consider somebody for employment, even if they have a felony conviction. And she's like, yeah. So I was like, went to my partners. I'm like, what do you guys think? They're like, yeah, let's do it. So we decided to tell people, hey, even if you have felony conviction, we'll consider you for employment. We had people lined up around the building to interview. I had to interview people in groups. There were so many people coming in. We were growing so fast. And I remember telling them at one point, I started what I called Quest University. And I said, I will teach you anything you want to know about entrepreneurship. And the reason I'll come in early, I'll stay late. I'll teach you how to build a competitive nutrition company. And the reason I want to do it is I really believe that if you understand that I care more about your future than your own mother, that you're probably going to stay here. And if the more empowered you get, the more likely you are to leave. One, fine. Like if you can go off and do amazing things in this world, I'm here for it. But I have a feeling that I'm going to be able to retain a ton of you just because you're like, yo, this really matters and this means something to me and thank you. And dude, it ended up being exactly that. Like seeing that moment where somebody thinks, because I remember one kid came in and told me, because I would give them like, guys, you have to understand, like you see an after picture of who I am now. You don't know who I used to be. And it's just a set of ideas. It always comes back to that for me. That took me from when I was broke and had no idea how to control my life to now running this $1 billion company. And I can teach you those ideas and it will have a similar impact on your life. And this one kid came to me and he's like, but I just have a hard time believing in this because my mom told me that people that look like me, the world doesn't want them to succeed. And I was like, homie, listen, you cannot think like that. And Kobe Bryant has this incredible quote, boos don't block dunks. And I was like, you can get so good at something that even if people want you to fail, they can't stop you. And so the goal is just to get that good, get so good that nobody can stop you from doing this thing. And so just so many of these guys went on to change their lives and do incredible things. And obviously Quest ends up becoming this historic run. And partly because we just had so many people there bleeding to make it happen. It really was extraordinary. So from the outside, hopefully people want to bring manufacturing back to America. But when you're in the middle of it, it is intoxicating of like the sense of pride and creating something and being a part of something. It's really pretty incredible.
I see the exact same thing on all fronts. I mean, Echelon Front, our consulting company, we got people traveling around the country and the world, teaching people these leadership principles that's going to make their life and their business so much better. The supplement company, Jocko Fuel, the extent that we went through to make the cleanest possible product was extraordinary. And everybody on the team knows that the standard is so high, it's unmatched. The energy drink here, like this is just to give you an indication. I didn't want to have chemical preservatives in it. And so the only way to overcome that was to pasteurize the drink, which means heat it up. And there was no lines that had pasteurization tunnels to make the drink in America.
At all?
At all.
Whoa.
So we pushed back our timeline almost a year and had a line built that had the pasteurization in it so we could put the cleanest product out there and my standard is, like the anecdotal standard for me is I want my kids to have this. So my own kids, I want them to be drinking this. I'm not going to make anything that I wouldn't be happy that my kids are drinking or consuming, and that's the standard. So everybody knows it there. And then, at Origin USA, same thing. Everybody knows, and they know they've got an opportunity, especially, you go up into, we got factories in North Carolina, we got factories in Maine. Those are areas that were decimated. And now, no jobs. And now we've got people that were from that industry are now coming back, and they're taking that knowledge and passing it on to the next generation. And it's just phenomenal. And yeah, the feeling that you get, and we do the same thing. Like, hey, we invest as much as we can into our people. And sure, they can look around and go, hey, I think I could go do this myself. Okay, I'll invest. If you want to go try this, go. But almost every one of them says, no, we're in. We're on the train. Let's go. So it's an amazing opportunity and a blessing to be able to have this opportunity. But I think that this mentality is spreading because people recognize, again, due to COVID, due to what's going on in the country. I mean, it's one of the problems that we have. Why are people sitting around looking at social media? Because they don't have a career that they are invested in. They don't have a skill set. Well, if you come and you learn how to work a loom and you learn how to weave material, all of a sudden you got a job and a skill and value, and that's awesome. So I think these things, they're going to have impact, and they're going to continue to have impact, not just, from an economic perspective, but really from a cultural perspective inside the country.
So speaking to that, meaning and purpose, finding that at work, one thing I've heard you say that we're looking at the same data and we're seeing something very different is you say, I hear all the time that young men are really struggling. There's something unique going on. There's nothing unique going on. There's always been an age that people go through, whether you're back in the 40s, 80s, whatever, it doesn't matter. You're always going to see it. I look at the data, and the data seem to suggest that there really is something unusual happening. I wrote a bunch of the statistics down. According to mission readiness, 75% of 17 to 24-year-olds back in 2009 were ineligible for military service due to lack of education, obesity, and other physical problems. That number's declined to 71%, but hasn't exactly gone to a great number. The former Undersecretary of the Army, Joe Reeder, said, imagine 10 young people walking into a recruiter's office and 7 of them getting turned away. We cannot allow today's dropout crisis to become a national security crisis. Men are physically weaker than they were 30 years ago. Grip strength is down 26 pounds for men aged 25 to 29. Obesity rates for young men have skyrocketed, for young people have skyrocketed. Fewer young men are having sex. That one's a big trigger for me. More men are committing suicide, which obviously is terrifying. Anxiety and depression rates are off the charts. And the military in general just has a recruiting problem, largely for the thing that I said above, but also there's just a negative sentiment against the military. But you look at that and you think, same as it ever was.
Well, according to your numbers, it's not same as it ever was. So if you think you're a person that's listening to this right now and you might be on that list for one reason or another, I got some ideas for you. Go to the gym, start training jiu-jitsu, clean up what you're eating, try and figure out a skill that you want to learn. Go learn that skill. Go be productive. Go make money. Go meet some girls, apparently, if you've got some issues where you're not having sex. So I think these are all things that you can remedy. I mean, they're clearly things that you can remedy. And as far as the military goes, what they probably need to do is some kind of a program where we take people that aren't physically ready for the military and put them through a program for 4 weeks, and you could probably get just about anyone ready for the military in 4 weeks of training, maybe 6 weeks. So, yeah, that's it's sad to hear those things. It's probably the reason that I don't see a lot of it is because, I own a gym in San Diego, California, called Victory MMA. I own a gym, and guess what? The gym's filled with a bunch of people that are trying to get better, a bunch of men and women and girls and boys that are in there training, learning jiu-jitsu, lifting weights, doing pull-ups. That's what I see. And it's a lot of them. And then obviously with the supplement company, you see people all the time. We sell a lot of product. Why are we doing that? Well, because people want to get better. They want to eat healthier. They want to have clean fuel in their system. So that indicates to me that people are shifting in the right direction. And Echelon Front, we do events all over the country. Oftentimes when we do those events, the questions that we get asked are about being being physically in shape, how to manage your health, how to stay on the right path. So even though there's some anecdotal information, and it's not even anecdotal, even though you've got some facts there that paint a pretty sad picture, I would go so far as to say we might be at some kind of a bottom of the trough right now, and people have recognized that that's where we're at, and now people have turned the corner and recognized that we got to get back into shape, get off of your phones, get out into the gym, get into the field, get outside, go walk, go hike, go run, go train jujitsu, and go get after it. And I think that is, again, I would venture to say that we are probably at the bottom of a trough right now, and we're climbing out of it, and we're about to rebound and end up higher on the other side. How's that for some positivity coming at you?
I like it. That was good. It was
That's
very
what I see.
energetic as
That's
well.
what I see all the time. That's what I see. I see these people. I have a gym. I see these people every single day, and there's new people signing up every single day. We sell supplements that make you stronger and healthier, and people buy them all the time. That's a huge indicator of where people's minds are. I think COVID helped, because I think during COVID, people started doing research. People started to recognize how important it was to be healthy. So I think there's some things that are going to swing us out of this trough, and we're going to be stronger, faster, and smarter than we ever were in this country.
I love it. I'll sign up for that message. When people ask me, hey, I want to get into business, what should I do? The first thing I will tell them very often is get in the gym and get in shape. Why do you want to see people get control of their body? That's using my language. But why do you want to see them get in the gym?
Because everything else in your life will get better. Everything else in your life will get better. Everything else in your life will get better.
Why do you think that happens?
You know, take your car to the shop and get it tuned up. It's going to do better. It's going to do everything better. It's going to accelerate better. It's going to brake better. The radio's going to sound clearer. Everything's going to be better. It's going to smell
Jocko,
better.
Why do I need my body to be in shape?
Yeah, it will help everything that you do if you start to exercise. And I recommend, look, exercise whenever you can. You got to make it work. I recommend you exercise in the morning. I recommend you get up, you get out of bed, you go exercise, get on a program. It doesn't matter what the program is. And if you haven't worked out in 20 years and you're totally out of shape, cool. Start by walking. Start by doing a 10-minute walk, 15-minute walk, then a 20-minute walk, then a 5-minute jog, and then a 10-minute jog, and then get yourself a pull-up bar and start hanging on that thing. And then start doing a couple push-ups. Like, just start to build. And every part of your life's going to get better. It's not just, oh, this knucklehead Jocko sitting here saying your life's going to get better. No, you will be healthier. You will be more cognitively aware of what's going on. Like, your brain is sharper when you exercise. You will sleep better. You will think more clearly. Everything's going to be better. You'll perform better at your job, no matter what that job is. So, yeah, go get after it.
Yeah, I really agree. This is one of those. I think the best thing I ever did for getting good at business was get control of my body. One, to get control of your body, you first have to get control of your mind. That helps. And then there's also this really fascinating thing that happens that when you realize I showed up every day consistently, I pushed myself to failure, I did things that were hard, I was very awkward in the beginning, and my body changed. I was able to, bend over and pick up a weight that when I first came into the gym, I could not do. It's really hard to track when you're getting mentally more capable. It's very easy to see that you're getting physically more capable. And so
those two things correlate.
For sure.
They correlate. So when you become more physically capable, you will become more mentally capable. When you become physically more resilient, you'll become mentally more resilient. That is what will happen. That is what will happen.
For sure. Talk to me about fear and compartmentalizing that. So this idea of get after it. I love that. Again, another thing I think people are intoxicated by with your personality is, as you've said this many times, but people look at buds and it is this mental thing of, could I do it, right? The number of times I've asked myself would I make it? I think 15% or something make it. So that's part of this. But also just you've been in a situation where bullets are flying at your head and you've had to be calm and detach and step back and tell people where to go and face that I could make a call that gets somebody killed, that you're not playing a game, that on the other end of your gun is a human whose life you are actively trying to take, and victory is killing them. It's surreal. It's something that operators touch a lot. But the rest of us, man, that is like the most unfathomable, I can't believe this actually happens to people kind of thing. And so the fact that you can control your mind in that situation is unbelievable. How do you control your mind? Is it just exposure? How do you get?
Yeah, there's certainly some exposure therapy behind it. And that's one thing I learned once I was towards the end of my career in the SEAL teams, and I was teaching and I was instructing and I was running the advanced SEAL training. What I got to see was I got to watch how I could put somebody that doesn't have much experience into a pressure situation, and I could watch them fall apart. And then I could talk to them. We could rehearse some things, and you put them in another pressure situation and they'd be a little bit better. And then you do it again, they're a little bit better. And usually there would be a moment of sort of a profound moment where, I don't know, what's a good, it's almost like riding a bike. You know how you can't ride a bike and then you can? Mm. That's what I feel happens with the ability to detach and take a step back. It's like you can't ride a bike and then you can, or you can't, you never stood up on a surfboard and then you did. It's like that kind of thing. So I'd see guys get a little bit better, and then all of a sudden there'd be a switch that would go and they'd be able to take a step back, detach, they'd be calm. And how do we do that? We put them in those pressure situations repetitively, talk them through. Sometimes I'd have to be like, there's mayhem going on. It's a training scenario, but there's mayhem going on. There's paintball flying everywhere. There's explosions going off. And I'm looking at you and you're the leader and you got a look on your face. You're totally overwhelmed. And sometimes I would literally say, hey, Tom, come here. And I'd take you, I'd pull you into the corner of a building where there's no paintball's going to hit you. And I go, take a breath. Dude, take a breath. All right, look around. Take a look around. All right, what's your next move going to be? And just by doing that, you'd realize, oh my gosh, 25 seconds ago, I was totally focused on that one window over there where I think we're taking fire from. And I had this guy yelling over here and I didn't know what to do with him. And I got, someone was calling me on the radio and I didn't know what that was about. I took a step. I got myself into a spot where I could look around. I took a breath, and now I can see, yep, we need to flank the guy in that window. The wounded guy's yelling a lot, but he's going to be okay. And I need to get my forces consolidated on this building. And it would be that clear. So sometimes I would have to kind of hold someone's hand as they're detaching, or I'd have to pull them out of the scenario a little bit so they would de facto be detached from it. Sometimes we take it. If you were having a real hard time as a leader, I'd be like, all right, Tom, you're coming with me as from the instructor viewpoint. And now you're not in the firefight anymore. Now you're looking around like, why don't they just go over there? You and I would literally be standing 1 foot away from the leader that's supposed to be making the call. And you'd say to me, hey, why don't they just go over there? And I'd say, well, it's easy to see right now, isn't it? Yeah, it's so obvious. Why is that? Because your subordinate leader that's right there, right next to us, can't see this most obvious thing. Why? Because he's all emotional. He's all caught up in the scenario. He's panicking. And you, since you're not in the scenario, you're 1 foot away and you can easily see the solution, and so can I. So what you need to do, Tom, is you need to learn that when you're in that mayhem, you need to learn to detach, take a step back and look around. Take a breath and then make a call. That's what you're going to do. And that would help guys to have that eureka moment where they went from being a panicked, emotional, overwhelmed human to being a calm, detached, squared away leader.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful. And that's something I want to train more in myself. I think it's something that either I have just a mild natural advantage, or just maybe business has put me in that situation so many times. But I'm very sad that the following is a true story. A couple of years ago, Christmas Eve, man, of all times. We were having a party, and the guy that we were gonna play poker and pay a professional dealer. He comes in, he brings a table, all that. Set up the table. I go in the kitchen to get a drink, and my wife comes running in. She's like, "You have to hurry. The dealer's having a heart attack." And I come running into the room, and the only thing is to do nothing or deal with it. There's no gunfire or anything. It's just this one person is now in a very bad situation. And it was fascinating to see the different reactions in the room. There were some people that just moved away. The fact that they came to get me instead of dealing with the situation was already like, okay, that's interesting. So I go into the room, and you just go into, I'm a big believer, solutions ultimately are all that matter. So it's just like, okay, one, we need to assess what's going on. Because I looked at him, I'm like, he's not having a heart attack. I'm like, he's having a stroke. And so stop, identify, and then you start telling people what to do. You call 911 and come back. I remember being trained on that. Call 911 and come back. I don't know why that always stuck with me. And then it was, the person on the call is like, hey, you need to start doing chest compressions, and you just do the thing. But I really had this strong impulse in me. I don't want to be dealing with this. And so I had to step past that. And I needed to have thought a million times before that moment, just always look for the solution. What's the solution? Move towards it. So obviously you have to first know your goal to know what the solution is. Save this guy's life. Okay, cool. Save his life. What now are the solutions in order to do that? But it was interesting to me that there's still this tremendous amount of friction. From the moment that my wife came in and said he's having a heart attack, I wasn't like, hoorah, I'm not that guy, right? I wasn't like, oh my God, this is great, I get approved. What? You're just like, I hold myself accountable in this moment to overcoming this friction, becoming solution-oriented, and doing the thing. But I was like, if people don't sort of pre-rehearse, have a plan, train for whatever life is going to throw at you, if they feel the same amount of friction I feel to not wanting to be in a situation where somebody is having a stroke, it's fucking terrifying, they're going to back off. And so you could just see that happen in the room where there was a small number of us that had obviously mentally rehearsed these kind of moments, and so we handled it. And then there were people for whom their rehearsal was, I know who to get if anything ever kicks off. And so they acted accordingly. It's very, very interesting. And so for the average person that's never going to be in combat, what are the things that they can do to answer questions like, will I show up in that moment? Would I do myself proud? And they're never going to know if they'll do themselves proud in buds, but will I be able to do myself proud in moments where they get hard? Like Mark Divine does something, Coco Row, or I don't know. Do you know Mark Divine?
I know who he is.
Navy SEAL. Runs a sort of buds for the average person who just wants to see if they can make it, and it's done over 3 days or whatever. What can we do to better prepare ourselves to know who we will be in moments of difficulty?
Do hard things, whether that's waking up every day and working out, whether that's going to jiu-jitsu class, whether that's going to some kind of environment where there's going to be a stress that you're not used to. What kind of thing makes you afraid? Oh, heights makes you afraid? Cool. Let's learn how to parachute. Oh, public speaking makes you afraid? Cool. Let's go do some public speaking. Going out of your comfort zone and overcoming the butterflies that are going to be in your stomach and the little mini panic attacks that you're going to have, go do those things and do them as often as you possibly can. And you will get used to all these little feelings that arise when some pressure situation unfolds. And it's funny you said that you had like a friction of when they came in and said, hey, something's wrong. And you went into the mode of like, okay, well, we're going to solve the problem. That's what you're used to doing. You were the CEO of a company. How many times did you say, the manufacturing, we got a call from the customer, the shipping didn't happen. You dealt with a lot of problems. And no, they weren't like someone's life was at stake, like it was in this particular moment, but the process that you go through, we've got a bad situation. Okay, I can run away from it. That's not going to help. I can complain about it. That's not going to help. I can panic. That's not going to help. I can find a solution. That's going to help. That's what I'm going to go do. And so you go out and you do things that are challenging, and you will build some muscle memory of what to do in pressure situations so you don't panic. You don't do dumb things. And there's companies out there, Tim Kennedy's got a company called Sheepdog Response, and they do this kind of training. My friend Mike Glover has a company called Fieldcraft Survival, and they travel around the country doing events where you're going to get put in pressure situations. We have an event at Echelon Front, which is, we call it the FTS, it's a field training exercise. So it's very leadership focused, but it also provides some panic scenarios because we're going to put you into simulated combat situations. We have a really high speed, it's basically a laser tag system, but it's a really high speed laser tag system. But we have role players, we have explosions going off, smoke filled air, mayhem going on, missions to go accomplish. And we get to see people panic, people freak out. We also get to see the switch turn where they go, oh yeah, I know I can't panic. I know I can't freak out. I know what I need to do is lead, step up, make decisions. This is how I do it. This is my protocol. Take a step back, take a breath, look around, make a call. We teach people how to do that. That's what we do. So from a leadership perspective and from an individual perspective, that's why we created a program like that. Field training exercise, Echelon Front. Boom, you go in there, you learn some basic tactics, but it's not a tactical course. It's a course to learn how to handle stress and how to lead in stressful, dynamic environments. And when we get done with that, when someone gets done with that course where they got a hostage to rescue, there's explosions going off, they're missing people out on the battlefield, there's down men, there's screaming, there's yelling, they go back to work on Monday morning and it's like, okay, something's wrong with the supply chain. All right, talk me through the problem. Let's get a solution. It puts everything in perspective. And most important, they learn a protocol of how to deal with stress and how to detach from that stress and how to lead in those stressful environments.
If you like this conversation, check out this episode to learn more.
We are being naive, not at least publicly entertaining the possibility that our antagonists abroad would take advantage of our famous lack of security. And you're going to see why we have to talk about genocide. Somebody has to open these topics if we are